Boy, there must not be much to do in Little Rock tonight. That's all I can say. Hot as it is. Thank you so much for being here, and it's an honor to be here and to be part of this very important exhibit. I would like to thank Stephanie and the Clinton Library and the foundation staff for the good work that they have done in this exhibit, as well as the library and what this library is about. I also want to thank Lee Ellen for all of the support she's given me over the years. We're working on our 49th wedding anniversary. I told this story one time, and she told me to never tell it again, but I'm going to tell it. One time this lady asked, well, what do you contribute to the longevity of your marriage? I said, our honeymoon. I said, well, what did you do on your honeymoon? I said, well, we took this mule ride down the Grand Canyon. On about halfway down, that mule stumbled, and I heard her say, that's once. We get on down a little further, and that mule stumbled, and she said, that's twice. We get out to the bottom, and that mule stumbled, and she pulls a pistol out and shoots the mule. And I said, why did you do that? And she said, that's once. And this little lady came up after the speech and said, did you really shoot that mule? But I want to thank Senator David Pryor, because I never will forget when I was director in Arkansas, we had this flood, and we had some house trailers on the inside of the levee between the river and the levee. And FEMA was denying assistance for those people. And so Senator David Pryor and Senator Dale Bumpers had me to come to Washington and had FEMA there. And it was the good cop, bad cop routine. And you know what? FEMA helped those folks too. But also something that was really unique was when they had my confirmation hearing and Senator David Pryor chaired the hearing. Well, Senator Dale Bumpers and Congressman Ray Thornton introduced me. Well, the introduction and the stories lasted so long, the hearing on my part just lasted about 15 minutes, which was a pretty good hearing. So I really enjoyed that hearing. But during the 8 years that I was director of FEMA, President Clinton, I can't tell you how supportive he was. And the things that he told me was, James Lee, if it affects people and it's going to be on the news, I want to know about it. And what was really interesting, when he was governor and I was director in Arkansas, we always gave him a situation report in his read file for every morning. So when I became director of FEMA, I set up all FEMA 10 regions, and in Washington, where they would collect all the information across the United States. And we would have it in his read file at 7:30 in the morning. Well, we were at a cabinet meeting, and this was before he elevated me to cabinet level. We were in a cabinet meeting, and I was one of those staff people that sat against the wall. And right at the end of the cabinet meeting, he said, you know, why don't all of you send information in to James Lee, because he's sending me in a report every morning at 7:30, and he'll collect it and send it in to me. After the meeting, I said, are you trying to get me killed? And he said, well, the reason I did that, now I know they'll send it. I said, well, thank you. But we had a lot of fun, but we saw a lot of devastation. During the 8 years, we responded to 360 federal disaster declarations. Everything from earthquakes to wildfires to hurricanes and tornadoes, and things that was just unbelievable when you saw them. The devastation and the pain and the anguish that people were going through. And it started in 1993 with the flood on the Mississippi River. Affected 9 states. And the devastation was just unreal. And President Clinton and I was talking about it, and Governor Carnahan, Missouri. And I said, you know, Mr. President, we can't let people build back in those areas that flooded. And you know that he supported, HUD supported it through CDBG dollars. And we were able to buy out on a voluntary basis and relocate people out of the floodplain so they'd never flood again. In Missouri alone, we bought out over 4,000 pieces of property. And in Pattonsburg, Missouri, a little town, 18 businesses, and 100 and something residents. When Governor Carnahan and I went there, the mayor proudly took us into City Hall and showed us the high water marks with the dates on the wall. They kept moving their shelves up to protect the city records. We relocated that entire town except one small business, and that was the mayor's business, a small engine repair shop. And we built a new school that was seismic resistant and also tornado resistant. It was one of these dome schools with natural lighting come into it. In Iowa, we bought out, I don't know how many residents along the river. And what was unique about it, all of the property we bought out, we put deed restrictions on it where no one could ever build on there again. They could use it for soccer fields, baseball fields, they could use it for recreational, but no buildings. And in Iowa, they worked with the Iowa Game and Fish Department to plant all that area back in the natural flowers, natural grass. And in just 2 to 3 years, the ecosystem all came back in that area around there. So we knew then that mitigation and prevention was going to be a huge part of everything we did, not only in disasters, but before disasters. And it worked extremely well. And I never will forget, GAO asked us to do a cost-benefit analysis on buyout relocations and prevention. And when we did that after the Mississippi flood, it showed that every dollar spent on prevention saved $3 to $5 in future losses. But it did more than that. It saved the pain and the anguish that people had to go through. So I'm extremely proud of what President Clinton supported and that we could do for the American people in these high-risk communities. Then in 1994, we had the Northridge earthquake. In Los Angeles and Pasadena, Simi Valley and all through there. And we had people literally living out in parks because they're scared to go back into any homes that maybe they even could live in. And Lee Ellen came out and volunteered her time in application centers. And the CNN was always after her doing an interview, and she would hide from them. But it was unbelievable. And the First Lady, Hillary Clinton, came out, and we took her to this one community, this one block, that had all historical homes on it. And every home on that block was shifted to the south because it was off the foundation, because it was a rolling type earthquake. We came down one block, went up the other block. There was one house sitting there, had no damage, and they were still living in their house. And the guy came out, and Mrs. Clinton asked him, said, well, you have no damage, what did you do? He said, I went down to the library and I checked out a videotape from FEMA Office of Emergency Services California videotape that showed you how to retrofit your house for an earthquake. And I did it myself, and I spent $1,000. And the biggest problem we have in this country, particularly for earthquakes and hurricanes, is the fact that we have inherited a traditional stock of buildings that were built before there was building codes and building standards and before they were ever enforced. Now, it's really critical that we start retrofitting those facilities, particularly hospitals, schools, public buildings, and showing people what they can do for themselves in their homes and their businesses to protect them from devastation. President Clinton authorized us to go to Congress to support a program that I wanted to start called Project Impact. I had this idea while I was at Walkout Hollow bush hogging that we might be able to do more in the prevention if we created this public-private partnership concept in a community. So I go back to Washington, and we come up with a name called Project Impact. And I take it to President Clinton. He okayed it. We went to Congress, got a little bit of money. So we started with 7 pilot communities. Deerfield Beach, Florida was one of them. Seattle, Washington was one of them. High-risk communities. And it became so popular that we went back to Congress and they gave us $25 million. And I think it was the first time in the history of the federal government that any federal agency had created a public-private partnership with businesses, corporations, foundations to support a local community to minimize the risk. And it was really interesting. At our last Project Impact Summit, we had 2,500 participants of legislators, mayors, council members, city council members, individuals, businesses. We had NASCAR as a partner, passing out 62 million pamphlets on prevention. They painted Kenny Irwin's car at the first Daytona race, Project Impact color, green. And he was our spokesman, and then he got killed in New Hampshire in a wreck. But they participated in that summit. They brought their racing teams up there. They brought simulators up there. 4 top NASCAR drivers were there. This was the fastest growing public-private partnership prevention program the federal government has ever done. We had 250 communities in that program. Seattle, Washington, as I said, was one of the pilot communities. What was interesting is the 3rd year anniversary of Seattle, that night they had a 7.0 earthquake. The next day, the mayor was on CNN, and they said, "Mayor, you had very little damage, very few injuries, and only 1 death, and it was by heart attack. What did you do?" He said, "Project Impact. We retrofitted our schools, we retrofitted our bridges, we retrofitted the hospitals, the public buildings, and people took it upon themselves for low-income housing, volunteer organizations, did all of this." That was the very day the Bush administration cut the program. Gone. Even Home Depot, Lowe's were partners. In Florida, Home Depot and Lowe's, they had one whole aisle in their stores of products that people could use themselves to retrofit their homes for hurricanes. They had training classes every Saturday for these individuals to come in to learn how to do it themselves. And it was a very exciting program, and a lot of communities are still doing it on their own. We had communities wanting to join just to join. They didn't want any money. They just wanted to join. They thought this concept was the best thing since mom and apple pie, because it brought people together that's never worked together, that's never tried to do what they need to do for the community. So I was excited about that. We have to do more before things happen to save lives and save property. And Project Impact was a way through a public-private partnership that we thought that would really work, and it did. And hopefully, the wisdom of our administration and Congress will put this program back in place, because we would provide a little bit of seed money. And I will forget West Virginia. It was a small county that Leela and I went to, and when we got there, they had this really bad flooding problem, and there was 5 ladies. They had bake sales, they had pie suppers, they had car washes, they did everything they could do to raise money to help fix the flooding problem in their county. So they were declared a Project Impact community. Went there, built the partnership, had a big signing ceremony. And these ladies were just amazing. They collected all their recipes. put it into a cookbook, and they sold cookbooks just to raise money to fix that flooding problem. Well, what was interesting is they went to the governor. They got a little bit of seed money from us, about $300,000. They went to the governor and got $1 million from the governor. And they fixed the flooding problem in that county that had been there for years and years and years for $750,000. So our first Project Impact Summit, she won the Citizens of the Year Award. Her name was Katie. Katie was 84 years old. Katie stood up at that podium that night, and she looked out across that audience, and she pointed her finger, and she said, "If I can do it, anyone can do it." And all her buddies were in their 80s. But they were fired up, I promise you. But we face a time in our country, whether you believe in global climate change or global warming, if you noticed, not only here in our country, but around the world, the different events that are happening today and what's going on. The floods in France just recently. The 20 people that lost their lives here in Arkansas just recently at a federal park. The people that lost their lives in Haiti. The people that lost their lives with the tsunami in Indonesia, in Thailand, and Sri Lanka. And we notice it all the time because, we grew up doing this. But right here at home, we have the New Madrid earthquake fault, 1811. Ran the Mississippi Rivers backwards for an 8.0 earthquake. It ran the Mississippi River backwards for 3 days. Ring bells in Boston Church. And I never will forget when I was director in Arkansas and Governor Clinton and I was talking, and I said, we need to pass some seismic building legislation for Arkansas. And we worked with the legislators and got that legislation passed for seismic building codes for eastern Arkansas. And I thought one day, Arkansas Highway Department, we were over in eastern Arkansas and they were building a lot of bridges, And I came back and I said, we need to have seismic building codes for those new bridges the Highway Department is building, because if all those bridges collapse, how are we going to get relief supplies into those people when something happens? And so I recommended the Highway Commission and them to talk to California and get their building codes for the highways, bridges, and so forth, and they did that. But from Northridge earthquake, we spent, just FEMA, spent $20 billion in that recovery efforts in California. Then in 1995, we had the Oklahoma City bombing, which was caused by some individual. And the time that we were out there, and the families that we visited with, and the 15 search and rescue teams that I brought in, it was probably the hardest disaster that I ever had to deal with, because we brought out 168 victims out of that building. But today around federal buildings, you see they've mitigated that risk now. They've put the barriers up where that cannot happen. But every event we have, we learn lessons. And we learn from our mistakes of the past and hopefully can prevent a lot for the future. But when you think about, in Arkansas, you think about our schools, think about our hospitals, think about our nursing homes, you think about communities and the risks that they face from earthquakes or tornadoes, no hurricanes, hopefully. But we lost 13 trees at the farm from Hurricane Katrina, so it does have damages. But we can minimize that risk. This exhibit, when you see this and you walk around and look at this, this is real. And people's lives were lost. And I never will forget in Spencer, South Dakota. We had a tornado that hit Spencer, South Dakota. Little old bitty town. Do you know what was left in that town? No bank, no post office. There was 5 houses left in the entire town. And when I was out there, and I walked around, and there's this antique store. The only thing left was the foundation around it. And these 2 women were there. And I said, "Is this your store?" And they said, "No, this was our grandmother's." And I said, "Well, is she okay?" They said, "Yes, she was in the store when the tornado hit." I said, "And she's okay?" "Yeah, she's got bruises and some cuts, but she's okay." Said, "You know what she did? She heard that tornado coming. She opened that door, and she had her cane, and 2x4s was flying at her, and she said, 'I whipped that tornado.'" But there's so many stories of people. We were in Florida after a hurricane and tornadoes come through. And I was down in one of the counties with the sheriff, and we were out looking at the damages. And the sheriff said, "You see that mattress up in that tree?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, there was a 3-year-old boy landed in that tree on that mattress, and he was alive. One came across Georgia, 21 miles on the ground, tornado. We were flying across the path of it in a Black Hawk helicopter. And the state director told me, said, "See that pond there?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "See that foundation?" He said, "There was a house on that foundation." And it was gone. He said, "You see that Chester drawer sitting there?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, the father and mother couldn't find their baby. And they were looking everywhere, and they was wading the pond and checking, trying to find the baby. And they heard something. They opened the top drawer, the Chester drawer, and the baby was in it." Just amazing stories that we've heard of events like this. But I tell you, one time, we were in California. I flew out with Vice President Gore and Senator Feinstein. And California had this huge flood. And the water had surrounded this one town. And they had volunteers coming from everywhere. And we land on this highway. And we start walking up to where all the volunteers were and where they were piling sandbags on this levee. And I had this big ditch. And so we're almost up there. And one of the reporters came over to me and said, "Director," said, "could you get the vice president down that ditch and throw some sandbags with those guys for a photo op?" I said, "Yeah, I think so." So we get up there, and I said, "Sir," I said, "they'd like for you to get down the ditch and throw some of those sandbags with these guys for a photo op." He said, "Okay." He walks up there, and he said, "Hey, guys, I'm going to come help you." And he bails off in that ditch. Secret Service goes crazy. One of them hangs his toe on a sandbag and flips, nearly breaks his leg. And Vice President Gore's down there throwing sandbags to these guys, and they're up there taking pictures. And he gets back out of the ditch, and he said, "What was the matter with the Secret Service?" I said, "Well, I just found out all those guys are convicts down there in that ditch." He said, "That's why that guy asked me for a pardon." I said, It was so funny. But there was a lot of times like that that humor helped you get through some of those tough times. And we had a lot of those moments. And I can't ever thank President Clinton enough for what he did for us and our family. I have to tell you a story. We were flying last October. He called me, and he said, "James Lee, can you meet me up at White Plains, New York?" And I said, "What do we need to do?" And he said, "I want you to go to Haiti with me." I said, okay. So I go up there. He doesn't realize how hard it is for me to get to White Plains, New York from Arkansas. So I get up 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, and I fly to LaGuardia, I get a car and a driver, and go to White Plains, New York by 8 o'clock. But we flew to Haiti, and on the way down there, I told him, I said, you know, Mr. President, because you believed in me and gave me an opportunity, I'm still able to help a lot of people in my company and what we do. And that's true. I think Leon and I contributed a whole $500 to his campaign because we didn't have any money. And so we went to Haiti. And we get there about 9 o'clock at night, and we have dinner at the palace with the president and the prime minister. And then we go to the hotel that you saw on the news that collapsed. We stay there. We're there for 3 days. And the people of Haiti, the average income is about $2 a day if you have a job. Unemployment's about 80%. Because they got hit last year with 4 hurricanes. And they were in bad shape before this earthquake, but now they're in terrible shape. And so while we were there, we were meeting with the different women's group, the parliament, different NGOs, volunteers that were there. And we went up to this little plant where they were taking in garbage, and they were separating the garbage, the plastic and stuff, pulling out the paper, and they would take that paper and put it in this big, has anybody ever churned butter? Okay. They were putting it in like a big churn, had a pole about that big around, and they were churning, putting water in that and churning that paper up and pulverizing it. Then they'd pour it in a wheelbarrow, and they would take it over and they'd stir it up in that wheelbarrow, and they'd fixed them 3 hydraulic jacks that they could take and pour that in them, these cylinders about this big around, about that long, and they would compress that paper in those cylinders and then punch it out, cut it about this thick, about that big around, and they were making briquettes out of paper for people to cook food on in their cooking pots to try to keep them from cutting trees down and making charcoal. And I saw all this plastic, and I said, you know, Mr. President, we could probably get in Northwest Arkansas, Joe Brooks and them, to put a washer down here and a shredder and a baler and bale this stuff up and recycle this plastic for them and create jobs. Well, he liked the idea so well, he announced it to everybody that we were going to do this. So we are very, very close right now of having that put in place in Haiti that's going to create jobs. But more important, the second phase of it is what we want to do is to build a plant there that will take that recycled plastic and make building material out of it, so that Haiti then can become the recycling country for the whole Caribbean. So this is a pretty exciting thing. And then President Clinton was he was very, very, very concerned about this year's hurricane season. Now this was before, all this stuff happened, before the earthquake. And he was really concerned about it. And so I said, well, you know what we could do? We could over in Haiti, the women are the ones that stay with the family and take care of the kids and everybody, and the men all run off when something's happening. So they're the ones that get injured. And so I said, we could do a CERT training program down here for women, train the trainer program that would train them, then they go out to their communities and train other women. We could do that. We could put the kits together for them, put the CERT training into French Creole, translate it. And we did that. He said, this is great. And so we committed to spend $250,000 supporting this program and do the program for it through the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Global Initiative. And it took us a little while to get all of this put together and all this translated and the kits and everything put together. And our team was they were ready to go on a Tuesday of the week of the earthquake. And I said, no, wait, I've got a meeting with President Clinton in New York. I said, he may have something else. Wait after the meeting, then you go. So we held off sending the team over there. And of course, I was at USAID meeting with the new administrator of USAID on Wednesday morning, or Wednesday afternoon, 5 o'clock, that big earthquake hit. Well, that changed the whole meeting in New York. It changed it to a response meeting. And then President Clinton asked me to go with him to Haiti after the earthquake, and I did twice. And I just want to tell you, with the support of Mayor Bloomberg in New York and Commissioner Bruno and the New York City firefighters and emergency management and the team that they volunteered to use to help us to do the CERT training, Sean Penn has an NGO organization in Haiti, and they're managing a camp of 60,000 people in Haiti. So Sean Penn volunteered for his organization to support us to train in their camp first. So we just completed the training and the certificate ceremony for 415 Haitian women trained the trainer in Haiti in that one camp. And there it was so well received that they literally had to turn people away. They wanted to help so bad. And our hope is now that some NGO and organization will pick this up and help us. Our goal was to train 20,000 people in Haiti in 1 year. But of course now it's more difficult, but we can still do it. But we're going to have some help to do it. But I'm going to close with this, and I know you're very glad. Each of us, no matter who you are, you can make a difference in someone's life. You can help a neighbor, you can help yourself and your family, or you can help the business where you're working in. Just develop a family plan for your family. If you got kids or grandkids in school, if you got, most families now, mother and father's work, and if you're at work and your kids are in school and something happened, where would they go? What would they do? Have a plan of where you will meet, or someone that lives outside the state, that a relative or a friend, that a phone number that they know that they can call and say, I'm okay. And everybody knows it. Particularly people with special needs in communities. It's really important that our churches get involved. It's really important that we know who those people are. I know David Maxwell's here and his wife. I know through Adam in Arkansas, they have a special needs list. But sometimes not everybody's on those lists. But your local churches, your local senior citizen centers know these people. Make sure those lists are up to date, because it could make a difference in someone's life. But I'm going to close with this. And Leon and I was at a fundraiser for the John Leland Institute, a seminary in Virginia. And there was this guy from Argentina, this Baptist minister from Argentina said, in Argentina we have a saying, if we're not part of planting the trees of the future, we don't deserve to stand in the shade of the trees of the past. So we need to plant some trees. Make sure everyone sees this exhibit, because it's got some valuable lessons in it of what has happened and things that you can do. It's a very important exhibit, and I'm very, very appreciative of the Clinton Foundation, the library, for putting this on. And I'm very, very thankful for State Farm, or Allstate, I'm sorry, for the support of this. And let me tell you about Allstate. They have been a huge sponsor of an organization that Admiral James Loy and I are co-chairing for the last 5 years. And I'm going to tell you why. If you look not only in eastern Arkansas along New Madrid for earthquake insurance, if you look in California for earthquake insurance, do you know how many people in California have earthquake insurance? Less than 12%. Do you know why? The policies are so high and the deductible is so high that the people can't afford it. And so what we have a vision of creating a catastrophe fund in every state that's funded by the insurance industries, because they buy reinsurance. And when they have to buy reinsurance, guess where the reinsurance money goes? It doesn't stay in America. It goes to Lloyd's of London. It goes overseas. So if they can take a percentage of that reinsurance money, put it in a state catastrophe fund, and that grows interest over the years in a nonprofit tax-free fund, and it builds up, then our goal is to have a fund like that that would then create a market for other companies to come in to lower the cost of a premium, lower the deductible, so people could afford it. To create that competition. The other goal, which we have legislation in Congress right now, in the House, is to pass a national backstop that would be funded by the industry, that would grow. Then if a state got overwhelmed from their fund, they could borrow off the national fund, and as the state's fund grew back, they would pay that back to the fund. I'm going to tell you, folks, people along the Gulf Coast and the East Coast all the way to New York, in the middle United States and the West Coast, insurance premiums are so expensive. And it's not a bailout. The bailout comes when people don't have insurance and the federal government, through FEMA, has to go in and pay for the recovery. That's the bailout. So we need to change that. And we're hopeful that H.R. 2555 will pass, and we just hope that the Senate will follow the path. But they have been a very, very strong supporter of us, and I'm glad they're sponsoring this because it is very important. And Ed Collins with the insurance company, he's really been a tiger about this. So I will shut up, and I know you're glad. I'll tell one more story real quick. I was giving a speech one time like this, and the audience maybe a little bit bigger than this, and I was giving that speech, and this guy sitting in the front row, you know, and in the middle of my speech, he gets up and starts walking out. I said, where are you going? He said, get a haircut. I said, why didn't you get one before you came? He said, didn't need one. But I see you've got your haircut, so you're all right. But I'll be happy to take any questions if y'all have some that you'd like to ask.
And let's go around and thank you for that. Please raise your hand so we can recognize you and then wait for the microphone to get there. Let me take a point of personal privilege. First of all, thank you for coming. Welcome. And you did a great job. Would you comment, if you can, on the oil spill and what you see?
Sure. This is probably the largest catastrophic event our country has ever seen. We thought the Valdez oil spill was at that time, but this is very, very devastating. We've been working in Louisiana for 5 years, since Katrina and Gustav and Ike, and we know those parishes, we know those people. And even before this oil spill, they were losing the marshes and the ocean wetlands. They were losing the size of a football field every day. And now this oil has gotten into those marshes, and it's shut down the oyster, shrimp, fishing. It's going to devastate the economy down there. And I'm really proud of President Obama did about meeting with BP and about getting that $20 billion fund set up, because that's going to be really important for sustaining at least some of those businesses and some of those fishing vessels and stuff down there right now. This spill is so large, and the thing that concerns us is that you see the spill on top of the water, but now they have plumes of spill that goes down 1,000 feet out in the Gulf. And what really concerns us now is we're 18 days into hurricane season, which goes to November. And the ocean is 44% warmer this year than it was last year for hurricane season. And we've been in what they call, if you're familiar with it, an El Nino season, where the jet stream stays down south, and that's what kept the hurricanes away last year. But now we're going into La Nina season, where the jet stream is moving north, which is going to open up just like a trough coming through. And NOAA did a kind of a model of what would happen if a major hurricane got in the Gulf. In some cases, it could help it a little bit, but if the storm surge was big enough, and if it was a big hurricane, then you could have contamination inland for miles. That's what's scary. And then you don't know, and they can't tell us, whether or not the rigs they have out there drilling those 2 wells down to stop this flow, they can't tell us whether or not those rigs will withstand a hurricane of major proportion. So this is going to be with us for a while. And the folks down in Louisiana are going to be suffering for a while. But our hope is that if the president keeps the pressure on them, that they'll at least have a living. I know Congress has been putting the pressure on them as well. And they've named a new person, Bob Dudley, that's going to be handling the long-term recovery efforts, which works for BP, but he's on the board of BP, and from all indications that I have seen from him, at least he's an American.
All right, let's take questions right here, and we'll wait for the mic, please.
I'm Barbara Jones. I'm the Executive Regional Minister for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, which covers Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. We have lots of hurricanes, et cetera. My question is, when you were on the cabinet, we knew where to turn for those disaster mitigation and recovery. When you were not there and Katrina hit, it was a mess. And we had difficulty finding help. And we have just now gotten back on our feet. And I'm talking NGOs, and I'm talking recovery. And we have had to do it on our own as churches, et cetera. So we are very afraid of what's coming this season. And we've got a conference call coming next week. With the new administration, what kinds of organization is there now? Where would we turn now in terms of government agencies? How is it set up now?
Well, I'm not there now, but we had a very, very strong relationship with volunteer organizations through VOAD through each state, and worked with them very closely and depended on them, particularly for the individual assistance and shelters, and particularly in the longer term recovery and even short term. We even had some agreements worked out where we would pay if organizational sheltered people or ran a shelter, or we reimbursed them. Also, we even had the places where they'd set up for the dogs, cats, and animals people bring to the shelter, and would reimburse their cost if they would come in. They donated all their labor, and so forth, which because people sometimes want to evacuate if they can't take their animal to the shelter, and which is not good. But I do not know, we had a whole division set up in FEMA that worked with volunteer organizations. I do not know what they have set up now. I know in Katrina, Sylvia Matthews with the Gates Foundation called me, and they wanted to send $1 million to Louisiana to help that particularly make a difference, and said, who should we send that to? And I said, you should send it to the VOAD organization at the state, because they're on the ground. They're there every day. And so that's what we did. But I don't know what they're doing now. I just don't. I know most states, and David Maxwell can tell you this too, but most states has within their state plan, you know, the volunteer organizations and exercise with them and everything. But I do not know what FEMA has now. I know that they support the volunteer organizations, but I'm not sure how much.
Yes, ma'am, right here. And please wait for the microphone here.
Mr. Witt, do you and the people you work with see that there seems to be any greater number of weather-related extreme weather events creating disasters, or does it just seem that way?
No, there is. I mean, look at what happened yesterday. What was it, 32 tornadoes in Minnesota? You know, I mean, we are having more events, and they are more devastating than we've seen in the past. And it would be interesting if one of the institutes would basically, through climate change or whatever, would kind of track this and record this in a way that people could have a better understanding of what's happening in what areas of the country as well as around the world. The World Watch Institute puts out a book every year, we call it State of the World, that usually does a chapter in that book on what's happening. But, I mean, you look back and from the 8 years we were there and to today, the events are much more frequent. And usually they're more devastating than we've seen in the past. But of course we have what we call CNN disasters now. They're a disaster, you know, they report everything. So, you know, back other years we didn't have CNN, you know, but I don't think it's just the reporting. I think, you know, and we always try to keep up with it and follow it. And I mean, look at China that's been hit so hard. And it's just, I don't know, it's changed. And we don't have a 1 inch rain anymore, or a half-inch rain. It's either 3 inches or 10 inches, or, you know, it's just different. And I don't know if I ever remembered this hot this time of year.
Questions? Yes, right back here, sir.
Sir, the news I've seen on TV and I've been reading has given me the impression that the government's response to the oil spill in the Gulf has just been disorganized to the point of chaos. And I'd just like to know, is that your impression too, or something else?
I think that the federal response to it has been, I think it's been good. It's a difficult response. They've been working very closely, you know, with BP and trying to stop the oil, and they've put as much assets that the federal government has down there. You know, some said they ought to put the military in charge of it. Well, the military don't clean up oil spills. You know, they just, you know, they're good at securing stuff and providing relief and so forth and protecting our country and around the world. But the Coast Guard is the right agency to be down there right now to deal with this. And it's you know, I was talking to Governor Jindal the other day, and I said, well, Governor, I said, maybe you need to ask for a federal disaster declaration, you know, that for protective measures. And I think in a lot of cases, the states along the Gulf, I think they're kind of reluctant to ask for stuff like that simply because they want to make BP pay for what damages they have. They don't want the taxpayers to be paying for it. They want BP to pay for it. And I don't blame them for that. but I think President Obama and I think that the federal government has put as much resources as they can possibly put in there to support this effort. Has it been perfect? No. Could it have been perfect? I doubt it. It's a very difficult thing to deal with, and I hope we never see something like this again, because it is, environmentally, it's catastrophic. There's no doubt, and there will be a lot of lessons learned from this event, and there'll be a lot of changes not only in the federal government but also in the state and local governments around this from these lessons, and it'll be interesting to do the critique of the response to this, and I know that will be done. But I'd have to say that they've done a decent job in it. I do.
Questions? Yes, sir. He's coming with a mic.
I used to work in floodplain management with the state, and I still have my certified floodplain manager certification. The question I've got is dealing with the situation in Mississippi County. I've read a lot about the 1927 flood, but also when I worked in that job, I met with some people in Mississippi County, especially a mayor of a real small town, who said, we can't have any kind of development here since our town's floodplain, all of it. What do you think of the remapping, and what can best serve both parties, obviously with safety being first?
I've looked at the remapping, and I understand why they want to do that, because they want if there's a possibility of anyone could be affected by a flood, they'd like for them to at least have an opportunity to have insurance and to have that coverage. Some people say that, well, they're going from a 100-year floodplain to a 500-year floodplain because they had to pay it. They were behind $23 billion from the Katrina, and they want to make that up. I don't think that's true. I think they're trying to manage the floodplains in a sense of people being covered if they've already built there. You know, if you're going to build in a 100-year floodplain, you're taking your own risk yourself. You know, it's just not good. But that's the reason I think they're doing this, is to manage the floodplains in a sense that people can have insurance and will be able to purchase insurance. That's the only reason I think they're doing it. When we started a program back when I was at FEMA of digitizing all the floodplain maps, where you could go online and you could see where that floodplain was. And I know they've been finishing that program and working on it hard, which is a good thing. But I think that's the reason they're doing it. And I know in eastern Arkansas that it's a major problem right now. And I know that people that's lived in a 500-year floodplain from a river or a creek or a stream that have lived there for 50 years and never seen a flood, they're not too interested in buying flood insurance. And I know that. But if you live in an area like that and you're going to build a new house, and those floodplain maps call for a 500-year floodplain, and you don't have flood insurance, you're not going to build that house there.
Before I ask Terry Garner, the director of the Clinton Library, to come give you a preview of this great exhibit, let's give a round of applause to Arkansan James Lee Witt.
Thank you.